Espresso Unicorn envisions a world where individuality thrives within a tapestry of shared humanity. Our apparel is a canvas for self-expression, and our actions reflect our commitment to the human collective effort. We believe in the transformative power of education and strive to empower individuals through our philanthropic initiatives. Join the dialogue on our Humanity Over Hues podcast as we explore critical topics and inspire change. Discover our initiatives and become a part of the change at expressounicorn.com. And follow us on social media to stay connected.
Thank you for joining us today on Humanity Over Hues. As you know, this is Espresso Unicorn's podcast that we put on monthly. And this month we are talking about suicide awareness and prevention. And we know this is a sensitive topic, but it's an incredibly important topic, and it's a critical subject that we need to talk about, and we probably don't talk about enough here in America. And so today we have three guests with us that are subject matter experts in their field of suicide prevention and awareness and psychology, specifically clinical psychology. And so I'm going to do a brief introduction of who they are, but I'm also going to give them a chance to introduce themselves so that they can help us understand kind of the finer workings of who they are and why they're doing what they do in such an incredibly hard space to work in. And as you guys already know, I'm Dr. Peters, and this is my life journey, my lifeblood of being able to put energy and time into spaces that matter. And so, you know, with Espresso Unicorn, we talk about authenticity, and I believe that is a huge part of where people begin to struggle with themselves and how they show up in the world, and can potentially lean into them having suicidal ideations, if not taking that final step. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first guest, and that's Dr. Sierra Symonette. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, an executive coach with a deep passion for mental health and resilience and high performance. She's also a West Point grad, so I definitely love that because she's an alumni sister for me. She received her doctorate of psychology from the University of Denver, and she has spent most of her career leading teams of behavioral health clinics and coaching top performers. And so I'd like to turn it over to you, Sierra, just to give us a little bit more about you and why you're here today.
Sure, yeah, no, thank you for the introduction, and it really is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. This topic is one that the more and more we talk about it, I know it has a large effect on a lot of people, both in the military and outside the military, and certainly has a lot of meaning to me, both personally and professionally. And so when I heard about the opportunity to speak on this topic, it certainly was something that I was really driven to do. But who I am, originally from the state of New Mexico and from the Navajo Nation tribe, and very proud of that heritage, but is also a population that struggles with suicide quite a bit, and is something that affects me at home, at work, and it doesn't matter what community you're in, it really touches us in different ways. And so happy to be here and happy to talk about this topic because, like you said, it's such an important topic.
Yeah, thank you. And then our next guest is Miss Linda Diaz. And Miss Diaz is a proud military veteran, so again, a sister of mine, and devoted single mother of 2 daughters, and also a grandmother of 1, right? Yeah. And so Linda's on here for a few different reasons. February 16th, 2013, Linda had a huge change in her life, and that was her 15-year-old daughter was successful at suicide. And she's here because of that experience, as well as that was her impetus to start working in the field of mental health. And she has spent her life since then working to help families really cope, one, with suicide, as well as to help prevent suicide in our schools with our young people. And so Linda, I just want to turn it over to you to give us a little bit more about yourself, because there's tons more on here that I can go into, but I think it would be better for you to share with us.
Well, thank you. Again, I'm gonna mimic the words from Sierra. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And the most important thing about bringing awareness to mental illness, and suicide is the fact that, in my eyes, it's a silent killer. And information is key, awareness is key, and sharing what I have gone through and experienced in my journey of becoming an advocate and working with hundreds of family members and hundreds of individuals that have been affected, both civilian, military, veterans, with regards to the struggle of mental health and being taken serious and not looking down on as being a weak individual because they cannot cope with the trauma that they've been going through in their life. So I'm here because I want to share, one, my personal journey, and two, all of the information that I have picked up, the training that I've picked up, the signs, in order for everyone to be able to understand that this is information that every single household, everywhere, should know. This is information that is important, and just knowing this can save a life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And our last guest today is Mr. Miguel Sierra. And he comes to us as a suicide prevention program manager on Fort Meade. 20 years of mental health experience, with 10 of those years being active duty Army. And he's worked in obviously the military community, and he continues to do so on Fort Meade. And so again, for you, Mr. Sierra, I'd like you to talk to us about why you're here today and any other details that you'd like to share with us about your background.
Thank you, Dr. Peters. Background. So I myself, I'm a suicide survivor. When I was 23 years old, I went through not a little rough patch, but it was one particular summer where things just got a little overwhelming. And long story short, I felt like not being here was gonna help my loved ones live a better life. I was completely wrong, but that was a catalyst for me to actually get on a journey, right? I seen how my attempt impacted people that I love, kind of put me in a space where I became very intentional early on as an adult with trying to understand, right? How do we get to this point, and where does depression come from, and what are some of the things that we can actually impact outside of clinical settings, and the importance of community, the importance of connectedness, the importance of feeling supported, right? So once I joined the Army, by chance, right? Like once somebody asked me to teach a suicide prevention class, and I was very comfortable, right, translating the words in the PowerPoint into some sort of like a normal conversation. You know what I mean? So I found that was my gift, and lucky for me, I was E4 at the time, and I had assigned majors and first sergeants that looked out and gave me the chance to actually practice my craft, and gave me the positions of suicide prevention program coordinator for the battalions. So I got what I consider pretty good at facilitating the material, and over the years I feel like I've discovered a couple of things, or realized a couple of things that can help the community take some ownership of what suicide prevention actually looks like, and I would like to share that with the world. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And so let's jump right into it, right? And kind of the way that I want to do this is look at the awareness side first, and then venture into the prevention side, so people have things to take away that they can immediately implement within their lives. So as we look at some of the studies that are out there, RAND specifically, we have the PA that does studies, and I know, Miguel, you and I had this conversation before about the numbers, right? And as you look from 2010 to about 2018, we saw the numbers rise. There was a dip between 18 to 20, and then at 20, it rose again, right? And it's been creeping up. And at this point, what I'm tracking, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, again, I'm not the subject matter expert, I have you guys here to teach us, okay? I'm looking at a number of 17, average of 17 deaths per day, 17.6 for veteran suicide, and then 13 for civilian suicide. Let's talk about that. Why do we think that number continues to rise here in the States? And so if we can start with you, Linda, and then we'll go to Miguel and then come back to Sierra.
I want to say that it's the taboo. It's the shame. Families, individuals do not want to speak about what their struggles are. If they do attempt to share and speak about what they're going through, they are often abandoned. Individuals will not want to be around them for whatever their reasons are, because we can't assume what's in another person's mind. But I will say that I know that I saw those numbers dropping in 2018. And in 2020, when COVID hit, and a lot of individuals that I have had the experience and pleasure of advocacy and working on in legislation and things like that, they struggled. They didn't realize that they were possibly struggling. When the freedom to be able to actually go out and shop or go out and have dinner or whatever it is that they were able to do to get their minds off of whatever the trauma, the stress, or whatever was making them sad subconsciously, they were able to just get out of their house. When they were not able to get out of the house, that pretty much smacked everyone, really started to struggle. And I was actually surprised when I had individuals in the field that were suicidal. So, but again, they couldn't speak to their colleagues. And the shame of mental illness and not being able to talk about it freely with family, with friends, to be taken serious, trying to find a resource, a clinician that they could relate to, that could understand what they were going through. Mental illness is not something that can be fixed in 24 hours. And when it's gone undiagnosed because you've been able to go around it for so many years and just pretend it didn't exist, it takes even longer to try to get the right help and to get a resource that understands you and that can work with you. Sometimes you need therapy. Sometimes you need therapy and medication. But what's important is that no one knows that unless we speak about it. And Miguel said it. We really want to bring awareness to everyone and let them know that what they're going through is real. The struggle is real. Everyone struggles with something, but it's different for every person. And we don't want you to make a permanent decision for a temporary problem that could be resolved if you open up and let others in.
So the question was, why are the numbers rising, right? And it's funny because, as far as stigma goes, stigma has always existed, okay? And we're actually doing a little bit, as a society, a bit of a better job of destigmatizing mental health and encouraging folks to go get help and not looking at mental health issues or behavioral health issues or emotional issues as a sign of weakness, but it's part of who we are as human beings, okay? But there has been a shift in ballparking in here, but in the last 10 years or so, we are becoming a society that is self-isolating, all right? So I'm gonna say this, right? Besides the fact that stigma still exists, the rise of technology has played a role in us isolating ourselves from a level of face-to-face, interpersonal, human connection that is just not there anymore. Like I couldn't even go as far as saying hearing each other laugh. You know what I'm saying? Like, I remember when I was in college, and I just laugh, but when I was in college, for example, I remember the DMX album dropped, right? The DMX album. And we're all broke college students, right? So whoever had a little bit of extra paper that week went and bought the album, and then we all sat in the same room to listen to the DMX album. And not only that, but we passing around the little inserts, the thank yous. We used to read all that, right? And it was a community, right? But now, again, because the fact that you can just download the album on your phone is more so, I don't know, the Kendrick Lamar album came out, and I just, have you heard the song yet? And I just share the song with somebody else, and I just send it through a text message, as opposed to having to sit down and build. And that's how, right? That's how you build a support system. That's how your support system gets to know your facial expressions, the shift that happens from your baseline to, are you doing okay? Are you, more upbeat than usual, or less upbeat than usual, whatever it is. We have lost the ability to show up for each other, and just in a interpersonal way. I'm not even talking about when somebody's feeling down or depressed. I'm just talking about in general. The way we connect is having this conversation with each other. And again, it's a convenience thing. Even the self-help apps, right? Like, even I want to go to a therapist, but you can do it online now, right? You can do it online. You don't even got to go to the therapist. You can just get, you can do. People are using ChatGPT for therapy. Let me tell you, I asked ChatGPT a couple of questions like, why am I like this, right? And ChatGPT will give you an amazing answer, a very fundamental, sound answer, because he learns you. But at the end of the day, you cannot replace the feeling of talking to someone, right? The ability to have someone look in your eyes and be like, yo, man, if you die by suicide, I'm gonna miss you. You can't do this, right? Like, it's not the same. And, again, to answer your question, I believe that technology and the convenience of technology has played a huge role in us feeling more isolated. Because when that feeling of suicide creeps in, one of the things that is almost always there is that feeling of, it's just me and my problems, and can't nobody help me with this. Right? So we feel very much isolated with all of our whatever the problems are. We feel isolated with it, and you have no way, or you feel uncomfortable reaching out to somebody that you know who cares, or somebody is not, due to show up and play video games with you, whatever it is, right? To show up physically and see you, that becomes a huge burden in our quest, to eradicate suicide.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you brought in another dimension about AI, and I think we'll hit that before we finish this conversation, because that's a critical part of what's happening in our society, some for the good and there's a lot for the worse.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it highlights just how complicated suicide can be, and that I wish we could just put our finger and say it's one thing, but there are so many different factors when it comes to why suicide has increased, and you guys have touched on several of them when it comes to just the increased isolation within our society, COVID. We talk about one thing that I thought of as you guys were talking about was just the increased access that we have to ways to harm ourselves, with just increase in firearms and drugs. I remember growing up, like, the only drug I had heard about in my community was weed. Yes, and now I can't even keep up with just all the different, and it's just gotten more and more potent, like fentanyl and whatnot. And so there's a lot more accessibility to lethal means. And then there's bullying, and there's social media, and there's just all kinds of things that, within the mix can just kind of make for a pretty hard environment if somebody's struggling with something by themselves. And so I think that's where the awareness piece is so important, to just talk about all those different dimensions of why this is such a complicated problem, and because it's going to take more than just a single intervention to really get after it.
Absolutely. And so I didn't say this in the beginning. I mentioned about this being a sensitive topic, but there are going to be things that are said today that are going to be be triggering. And so I just want to make sure that my audience is clear on that. And if you need to take a pause, then take a pause and walk away. But I just do want to put that kind of that PSA out because we're getting ready to go into some stories now, and I know often that can be a triggering space. And so now as we look at the awareness side of the house.
And for the audience, right, if you do feel overwhelmed and you feel kind of stuck with whatever we're discussing, like it's always 988, right? So you can call or text 988 if you have an emotional crisis, for support.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So great answers about why we believe that the numbers are going up. Now let's talk about real world, right? We've all had to deal with people or even ourselves, right, as we're going through hard times. And in those spaces, let's talk about what do you see, right? What do you see in those spaces where people are starting to struggle? What are some of those indicators that you may see? And if you want to tell a story to help us understand kind of what that looks like, because no situation is ever the same, what are some of the things that, at least for you as a person, like it makes the hairs on your neck stand up, or it causes you to question whether or not that person needs something at that point in time? And so the reason why I want to bring this out too is because awareness is a big thing. I think we go through life and we float, right? And a lot of times we are not intentional about the conversations that we're having, the interactions that we're having, and we may be that smile that keeps somebody from whatever is next for them, right? And so how do you maintain this sense of awareness in this world that is overly distracted and people who are overly stressed, and especially in this current landscape? And so again, I give you the liberty of telling a story or just kind of helping us understand from the awareness perspective. Miguel, if you can start.
Okay. So I think we put a lot of responsibility on individuals that are struggling through something, right? Whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's life transitions. Hey man, if you need help, matter of fact, I just said it, right? Like, if you're feeling overwhelmed, go get help. But sometimes that depression or those life transitions can lead to chronic or ongoing, downward moods or whatnot. And I'm gonna share a story. I tell you, when I got out of the Army, for example, I did not want to leave the uniform. I didn't want to take the uniform off. I tried my hardest to have my leadership support me, and I made a professional assignment essentially to take care of my family, right? So my family was struggling through some things, and the Army pretty much said, we hear you, but we need you here. And I said, well, it's either you help me out here, or you're not gonna have me at all, right? So, and by all means, man, we were just having this conversation with my wife yesterday, and this morning too. If I had to do it all over again, I'll still choose my family, and I love the Army. I work for the Army now, thank God, right? But I love being in uniform. I love being an SEO, and it was a very hard decision for me. I didn't know how hard it was until later on. And my point is, I medically retired out of Hawaii. It was a great situation, right? I med boarded, I got medically retired. The VA gave me 100% before I ever took the uniform off, which I know for a lot of people, it takes years to get to that point. And now we're coming back to DC, federal capital of the world, so it was going to be hard to get a job here, blah, blah, blah. And then we got to DC, and all these jobs that were promised to me, I got you, I don't know where they went, but I didn't have a job, right? So my wife ended up getting a job before me, so it was daddy daycare, right? It was me and my kids at home. And for about 4 months or so, I would have to watch my wife, get in the truck and go to work after being in the uniform, right? When I was the one doing that, And at first it was like, I'm getting a little check from the VA. We have insurance, everything's kind of cool. I get to spend time with my kids. But what I realized was that I was working out, right? I was in the gym all the time, and now I have time to go to the gym for 4 hours a day, right? I would go to the gym, I was eating right, so my body looked amazing, you know what I'm saying? Better than I did in uniform, to be honest. But I would come home, and then I would go to my room, right? And I would sit down and I would watch Money Reruns. That was my show, Money Reruns, sometimes A Different World, and I would take naps in between episodes, okay? And the whole time my kids are being raised by Fortnite. I never forget that. The whole summer my kids would come up and say, like, Daddy, need V-Bucks, you know what I mean? And I was like, hey, shout out to the VA check, right? Here, V-Bucks, go buy whatever you want. And it wasn't until, this is like from March to about September of that same year, I ended up getting a job, right? And when I finally got that job, it wasn't even a good job. It wasn't even like modeling. It was doing like a food stamp fraud for the FDA or something like that. It wasn't me. I'm a people person. I'm in the computer. Now I'm snitching on people. You know what I mean? It was. Yeah, it wasn't a good. It didn't make me feel good. But the fact that I was being productive again I started feeling like myself again, right? And it was in that moment that I realized how depressed I was. I didn't even realize that I was not taking care of my kids, that I was not taking care of it. I was just spending time with my kids like I used to. I was sleeping a lot throughout the day. I was, I spent a lot of time in the gym, right? Which is, for me, is a protective factor. That's one of my self-care routines. It actually became a crutch for me, and I didn't even realize it. You know what I'm saying? So, a lot of times, and long story short, well, not short, I'm talking for a long time. Anyway, the person going through the problem might not even realize what's going on with them. You know what I'm saying? Like, because if at any point that conversation or during those days, anybody would have come up to me and be like, hey man, like, yo, like, kind of sleeping too much, man. You gonna hang out with the boys? I don't see you at the park with them. Something would have clicked in my head. You know what I'm saying? I would have been, hold on a second, like I am tripping a little bit. I am not doing this, I'm not doing that. So I think it's important for us to understand that, we have a lot of power just by showing up in spaces and being genuinely there, genuinely present in spaces around the people that we love, people that we work with, people that matter to us, people that are just acquaintances even, right? If we are present in those moments, we can pick up on certain things and deviations from the baseline so that we can make them aware sometimes, right? Or we can have those conversations about what's going on with them. And I said being genuinely present because if you're not, and you try to talk to me about my problems, and I don't believe you're being genuine in that moment, I ain't gonna tell you nothing, right? I'm not gonna talk to you about anything. So I think that the awareness piece is more so for us as a community, right? And I don't know when you want me to dive into the veteran piece of it, but I have a whole lot to say about that too specifically. But we have to be more intentionally and genuinely present in our spaces. Look up from our phones and smile at each other, and like hug each other, and like high five each other, laugh with each other, and cry with each other, whatever it is, so that we can get back to like this primal need that we have for interpersonal connection. As human beings, we need that, right? So, I'll leave it at that for now.
No, and I think that's great, and especially as we talk about veterans, and I'm going to take it back to the military, right? So, as a military leader, a lot of the times there is not that connection with your personnel, right? Where you often don't know them.
Right.
So how can you tell a change in their behavior or, etc., if you actually don't have a relationship with them? That doesn't mean that, a battalion commander or a company commander or a first sergeant has to be your friend, right? But they should at least know you and your character, and what you show up as. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, we divorce ourselves from that as leaders, and that lies a problem, right? Because we cannot recognize, and then we wonder why these things are happening within our formations. So, that's great. And then Sierra, I'll go to you. So from the awareness perspective, whether there's been a situation where maybe you've gone through it or you have dealt with someone else who is tiptoeing into the dark side, right? Because I think Miguel had a great point that often when we're in the fight, we don't even realize that we're in it, and when we do, it's often too late, right? So.
Yeah, I would say on the clinician therapist side, one of the things that I've had to get most comfortable with is having uncomfortable conversations and asking those questions and listening to what they're saying, but also listening to what they're not saying, and being okay pushing a little bit, you know, and just saying like, oh, you said you're not doing well, what's going on? Oh, what's, you know, and just kind of digging a little bit more. And sometimes it's uncomfortable and sometimes it's scary because, you know, what if they do say like, yeah, I just, you know, I don't want to be here. And that can be very kind of frightening to hear. And it's like, just keep going, you know, and ask and be there and don't run away from it, you know, don't run away from the conversation because that might be the first time that they're opening up about it. And that might be an opportunity to, you know, genuinely show that you care and then follow our training. But I think on the therapist side, it's really listening and going back to your point about authenticity and genuineness. It's really caring and not just like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that sucks. I'm sorry that, you know, or feeling uncomfortable. Right. It's like, no, wait a minute, you said you're not doing well. Does that really mean what's going on? And that can take some practice for sure. And I still have a lot of uncomfortable conversations with people, and then being comfortable just asking people directly, are you thinking about hurting yourself? And being okay with just having that conversation because you're doing it from a place of really caring about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Any thoughts?
So, what I want to share and listening to both the Sierras. So, there's one word that comes to mind. Desensitized. That everyone is becoming desensitized to individuals. So Miguel hit it when he said, you know, individuals are starting, you know, to do things for themselves and rely on ChatGPT and things like that, and having that difficult conversation to try to get individuals to kind of open up to really understand what they're not saying. And you know, in my journey, in the hundreds of individuals that I have seen struggle, you know, with not being diagnosed and not understanding that they are depressed, and that going undiagnosed and not seeking assistance, and maybe reaching out, trying to speak to their parents. Hey, you know, dad, hi mom, while they're on the phone or while they're watching TV or something, and they're kind of, you know, being ignored. Sorry, hey, give me a minute, I'm a little busy right now. And then they never come back. People in general, not just kids, they reach out and they want to say something to you in that moment that they believe that they need help. But we don't see those signs, and they often get turned away. And so what they want to say, they never say it again because that moment of courage is now gone.
Yeah.
And so in my personal journey, I lost my daughter, and in losing my daughter, I was very aware of my daughter's emotions. I took my daughter to the doctor when she complained about her stomach ache, her headache, when she was, feeling sleepy and falling asleep in class, or when she was having these breakouts and then being diagnosed with eczema. So everything that my daughter was going through, I took her to the medical doctor. I took her to her pediatric nurse practitioner who saw her for all of these things. But the one thing that the nurse practitioner did not take into account when all of the physicians, all the specialists, came back and said, no, she seems okay, she's got a little eczema. They didn't take the mental into account that the physical was manifesting itself. And it was due to the mental. And it was because my ex-husband, my daughter's biological father, attempted to kill us multiple times. He was also a heroin addict. My daughter was going through a lot. And not only was she suffering, but she was also the conduit for her friends that were also suffering, that were being ignored by their family members, or friends that were removed out of the home because of sexuality and the family not liking that. And the isolation, here we go with Miguel's isolation, these kids, because right, people, they turn into themselves. And this is before ChatGPT. ChatGPT is becoming an issue, a relevant issue now. It's just another issue on top of everything else that we've been going through. But I'll go back to saying desensitization is key. Speaking about something that is very prevalent. It is no different than us speaking about heart disease and the prevention for heart disease or diabetes or cancer, prevention and things like that is no different. We're having the same kind of conversation about an illness. However, this illness is a silent killer. And if we don't get help, these individuals are advised by the abyss of darkness that is living and developing its own voice in the head saying, you can reach out to Miguel, but he ignored you the first time. Or you can reach out to mom and dad, but they ignored you. And you don't really want to go to a clinician because you don't want to tell your family's business or private business and show that. And the only thing that I can say is we just have to have the conversations. And the only way that we can work towards prevention is by allowing individuals to understand that it is okay to speak about, being sad or being depressed or suffering from a mental illness. Let's not shame others, because 1 out of every 5 individuals in this world has struggled at some point. Not everyone speaks about it, but it's very real. And we all go through things, whether it's financial, gain, financial loss of a job, change, loss of a friend, loss of a loved one. Change is every day. We are constantly going through change, but when it comes to, trying to be able to actually speak on something that is very real, however, the public doesn't want to acknowledge it, everyone becomes desensitized to it, and then they start to struggle alone. And we don't want that. We don't want anyone to keep struggling alone.
So I'm going to take this into probably a controversial space because between all three of you said a lot, right? What about the mindset that this generation, right, as well as probably the one prior, so with the Z, millennials, right?
I lost it.
Right. Well, we're on alpha now.
Okay.
But they're weak, right? They're not mentally tough anymore. We didn't have these issues back in the 50s
Well, we
or
had
whatever.
issues.
Oh, we had some issues, right? So I'm throwing this out because I want you guys to take it from your own individual experiences and your subject matter expertise based off of that stigma and based off of our country believing that the generations that are currently in those spaces and really fighting within this realm of AI and all of this, that they just don't have the intestinal fortitude, the strength to see past some of these psychological issues that we didn't have to deal with in the past. And so I'll just kind of throw that out there, right? Because we know that that's a part of this conversation and a part of the stigma that's out there.
It is, but realistically speaking, let's just say this. We can't compare problems of today to yesterday.
Why not?
Because they're different. The problems of yesterday were problems of yesterday. I hear it and I see it all the time. Older generations will say, oh, you're not going through anything. You want to hear stress. Let me tell you about when I went through. Absolutely. Everyone struggles. Each era is different. Each era was difficult for every person in that era. So this is a new era. And this era is difficult for these individuals. Yes, they have Google and Gemini and ChatGPT and all of these other things that they can sit here and they can talk into it. I mean, I wear an Aura ring, and my Aura ring knows when I'm stressed. And the next thing you know, I get this notification. My Aura ring tells me, you're a little stressed today. Would you like to speak to an advisor on that? And I'm thinking to myself, no, that's just because I'm moving. It's very difficult. Well, thank you.
Really talking to your finger.
So, but it's, you know, but that's something that I do. A lot of people wear Fitbits and things like that, but if they take into account what they're going through, they can see it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a difference when being aware, and I say this all the time, you know, I've been given a life sentence to cry and feel heartbreak for every day that I'm not with my child. However, I'm not sad. I'm not depressed. I don't need medication. I acknowledge my grief. I know how I feel. I don't hide from it. I don't press it down. And I don't ignore it. And I openly talk about my daughter. I keep her love alive with me every day. But a lot of people can't do that. That creates and manifests depression when you actually suppress that in others. And see, no two people are alike. A lot of other individuals, and I said this before, you know, numbers, when Marin died, she was one of 41,169 reported suicide deaths. I'm one of those 41,169 individuals who lost a loved one to suicide that even speaks about it. And there's been over 1 million since. And how many of me do you see sharing something that is the hardest thing to walk through in life? You know, so our struggles from yesterday, we can't keep putting down the individuals today and say, what you're going through is nothing compared to what we went through back in the day. What they're going through and what we're going through is not the same thing. You know, a lot of kids, no pun on Miguel and, you know, Fortnite, but a lot of latchkey kids are raising themselves. So they have to take care of themselves because a single mom or, you know, unfortunately parents have gone to, you know, whatever loss, whether it's addiction loss and abandonment and not being present with their child and being raised by other family members. These kids, what they're going through, it's not the same thing. I don't want to put down anything of what happened yesterday because yesterday created our future. However, if we continue to put down individuals and compare yesterday to today, what's our future going to look like? Because we're losing not just adults, but we're losing children because you have 5-year-olds dying by suicide. And so this is affecting the world. And I mean, I can go on forever, but you know, this is just, you know, what is it? I'm gonna say scratching the surface of what we need to do.
Well, I think there's some validity to the whole, you know, like this generation is, and I won't say that it's not that, right? But I think it's deflecting our own responsibility and our you know, ownership of how the role that we play in creating spaces. I feel like when I look at my children, for example, like there's no way my kids can grow up in the environments that I grew up in. All right, latchkey kids didn't just come about now. Like I was a latchkey kid myself, right? I had a single mom. I think a lot of the things, like growing up in an environment with a single mom, some of my mom work, and we did have to raise ourselves. And I had coaches and community and counselors and people that filled in those roles, for, you know, those parental roles for me, to the point that now as a father, I want to make sure that I'm present for my kids. But that made my kids are loved and nurtured, you know what I'm saying? They didn't have to grow up fighting and you know, dodging drug dealers and avoiding joining gangs and all that. They don't have to grow up in this environment. You know what I mean? Which makes us think that, oh, they're weak or they could not handle that. But could we handle what they're handling? Could we handle the fact that when you get bullied in school, it was just in school, but now with some social media and everybody sees it, and sometimes you go viral with the bullying and now the whole world sees it? Could we handle that? You know what I'm saying? It's different struggles, but it's still struggles, right? And we do a poor job, especially, I'm a Gen X, I believe, I think in 1978. My generation does a very poor job of meeting people where they need to be, where they are. You know what I'm saying? Like we wanna compare, we wanna insert our own lives into their lives. I call my kids sometimes playing around like my little suburban kids, you know what I mean? That's what I call them. You know what I mean? Like they got all these shoes and all these, you know, they got PS5s and Xboxes and Nintendos, and I'm like, man, we have one NES system for the whole block. You know what I'm saying? We had to like link up in one house and play. And y'all don't have that problem, right? My kids, I need shoes, and I see 7 pairs of shoes in the freaking closet, but you need shoes, right? I grew up with 1 pair of shoes and 1 pair of shoes to play basketball with, right? 2 shoes. Anyways, the point is, we have to do a better job of listening, right? Even hip hop, like I go back to music a lot. A lot of the music that's being put out now in the hip hop environment talks about how depressed and how anxious and how sad these kids are. And because they're saying they're looking at a little tippy step, wait, I'm not listening to that crap, man. Your music is garbage, mine was better. But take 2 seconds to listen to what these kids are saying, and now respond to that in a way that you make your kids feel acknowledged and heard. You know what I'm saying? And we do a terrible job of not inserting our own stories into our kids and their friends and these younger generations' issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Sierra, I kind of want to take the same approach, but look at it from the aspect of veterans transitioning, because still that stigma is there too, right? You know, military people, we're not supposed to show emotion, we're not supposed to show any type of weakness, and I don't think that stops just because you take the uniform off or you're in your transition period before you become a civilian, full-fledged civilian. And so I know one of the things that we look at from the aspect of what creates this space of potentially hopelessness and getting into the realm of suicidal ideations is that transition and the issues that come with it. So what have you seen, or what do you feel from the aspect of that side of the house with military transition members? And I bring this up to one of our guests this quarter was Dr. Natisha Isabel Smith, who works with the Arabella Wellness Center, and she helps with women who are transitioning, and something that we all know, like there's just not enough programs for women, period. But helps women who are transitioning from the military into the civilian sector well before they actually transition, so a good 4 to 6 months out to try to help, ease their transition. So I just kind of leave that to you as far as what have you seen and any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have a lot of thoughts, and I think that this is actually where I feel more hopeful than anything, because I feel like we are, as a generation, talking about things that 20 years ago the generation of transitioning veterans weren't talking about. And unfortunately, I think that does come from a place of having seen a lot of people struggle, and just even what you talked about with the numbers. So I think there's this advocacy amongst veterans to have more of these conversations and talk about transition as a pretty significant life event. I mean, I was just talking with somebody last night who's getting ready to retire after a great amount of time in the military, and they acknowledge that this is probably one of the biggest transitions in their life. And so I never want to downplay how significant that transition can be for a lot of different reasons. And there's a lot of ways where that can really affect a person if they're not ready for it. And so I think what I'm seeing on the other side is a lot more conversation about, hey, these are the things that we wish we had done, and these are the resources and the conversations I wish we were having, and I think it's just opening up that space to just be real. Like, let's just be real about how difficult this can be, and these are the things that you can do to prepare for it. When it comes to not just routines, but just even your identity, you know, making meaning of the experiences that you had, finding new purpose, like you talked about, Miguel, like that's really important. And when you don't think about those things, you just kind of find yourself, you know, lying on the couch, eating Doritos and, you know, drinking beer all day, you know, and that might be fun for a little while, but after a while it's like, I really need to, now what, right? Like now I need to really, you know, find new meaning, find new purpose, find new drive, establish new healthy routines, all that kind of stuff. And so I say that I think that there's a lot of great conversations about how we can do better. And so even like the Skill Bridge program that the military's put in place, I think is a great way to do that. I see a lot of veteran groups in a lot of different places where it's like they're on the other side, like greeting you, you know, in terms of different organizations. So I think it absolutely can be a respecter for folks, but I also think that it's where we are also making a lot of progress to just help people with that transition because of what we've seen with people struggling, going through that process without the right supports in place.
Yeah, no, that's great. So again, go ahead.
I just want to add to that, right? I think the transition starts, I think you mentioned one of your guests was starting to transition.
4 to 6 months.
Yeah, and I believe the transition starts from the moment they put the uniform on, right? In the sense that, for example, I teach suicide prevention classes now for the Army, you know, mandatory trainings, whether it's annual training for everybody or the leadership training for personnel in positions of leadership or positions of trust. And one of the things that I've done is I've infiltrated, right, or invited people from the community to my trainings. So you can come take the training. It's an Army training, but you can apply it to, you know, whatever, you know, career field you're in. So I remember last summer I did a class where I invited a fireman, a teacher, a yoga instructor, a writer, and community activist, and a data analyst, like a tech guy, right? That got nothing to do with the Army at all. I know them. I'm as close as they'll get to the Army, right? So I put them in the room for 3 days with, you know, Army personnel. And I think a Navy guy was there too. And what it did was it forced the military personnel to stop talking acronyms. You know what I'm saying? Well, they had every other thing was like, well, what is SITREP? What is ACE? What is, you know, they kept asking. And so at some point they had to start talking like human beings, right? And one of the things that I make a priority in my trainings is reminding people, all right? One of my good friends, Andrea Johnson, always says like, yo, suicide is not an Army issue, it's a human condition issue, right? It's true, okay? I don't need people walking out of my training being able to support your soldier to a suicidal crisis, but not their aunt or cousin that calls them from New York City that's 15 years old and struggling, and like, I don't speak your language. Nah, you do. So let's get to the point where we start understanding that we are more than just soldiers or service members, right? That yes, there are very specific things that we can do as a veteran community to take care of each other, but we're not just veterans. We are neighbors, we are husbands, wives, cousins, daughters, sons, right? We have all the different roles that we play in our lives, and if we start early on helping the young soldiers understand as they come up the ranks that you are more than just an NCO, you are more than just an officer, I think it will make a transition a little bit easier. Right? It'll still be difficult because of, you know, shout out to the Army, man, you know, they make things a lot simpler for people, right? But if we start, at least in the suicide prevention piece of it all, if we start looking at ourselves in a more diverse way than just I'm a soldier. Because when you take the uniform off, you know, right? You take the uniform off, as much as you're looking forward to retirement and things like that, or getting out, it's a big shift.
Yeah, military to civilian world.
I know people.
Yeah. And how long did you serve, Linda?
8 years.
8 years.
And it was, I had that hope. I'm happy. all of, even though the subject is still taboo and we have a huge stigma on it, it's still difficult, but extremely helpful and much better now than what it was. Because for me to come out from being told what to do, where to go, how to do it, when to do it, and the most popular ones sit and wait forever,
Hurry up and wait.
Exactly. Into the civilian world where it was just like an ocean with no control, and it was different organizations, departments, having to do things, not having, that revelry in the morning and things like that. To come from the military into the civilian world and be able to, come back into the civilian world where the structure was not there. It was non-existent when I came out. It's definitely much better now. Still a difficult topic because you have wonderful individuals like Miguel and Sierra, that are able, that work with programs to help. It's still difficult. It's still difficult because I have to talk to my family. I have to get to know these people. I have to stop walking like a straight board. It's just so much. It's right. It is. And then, oh my God, I gotta wear what clothes? I can't just wear my uniform and my boots. And I tell everyone that I'm so jealous of the fact that I had to switch on all my boots all the time, and not the desert, boots. And I was just like, it was different. I was always proud. Being in the military was very difficult for me. However, that's because, again, we're talking, I went in 1986. And
But
so
it's still a part of it.
it's still a part of me. It actually helped. I was always disciplined, self-disciplined, and organized. The military, all it did was just make me extremely OCD. Like somebody else I know. But but
I feel like being attacked now. It started out real subtle. It started out real subtle, but now I'm seeing a pattern develop here.
all right.
Everybody chill out.
So, I'm going to give you another one that is probably a bit controversial. Minorities, specifically Black people, right? Hispanics, we don't commit suicide.
No, BIPOC mental illness does not exist. No, right?
But also, and Sierra, I'm going to start with you. Native Americans. We don't talk about Native Americans, right, or natives, and the condition of suicide and suicidal ideations and mental health. So I'd love for you to kind of take that, and then you guys can jump in afterwards about BIPOC people, minority people don't operate in this space, right? So.
Sure, yeah, I know it's a very difficult topic because it does happen, and the rates for within Native American males, I think, are the most at risk for suicide. And what was interesting growing up, on a town that borders the Navajo reservation is I had no idea that was the case, and it wasn't until looking back on a lot of the people that I went to high school with, just seeing like how many of them were affected by it was really heartbreaking. And I think it's kind of the broader conversation of it. It just wasn't talked about, and now I'm glad that it is talked about a lot more. But it's very very tight to the community where it is talked about, and there is a lot more awareness, and there is a lot more resources and whatnot that wasn't there even 10 or 15 years ago. But on the national stage, it's very, very, very little. Very often, it's not mentioned. It's almost like you have to get closer to the community. And then there's going to be certain like community cultural aspects to that conversation that you have to be mindful of. I mean, there's a stigma associated with suicide to begin with, but then it can kind of be exacerbated, in certain cultural centers. And so it's just getting them comfortable talking about it and like, hey, it's a real thing and it's okay to ask about it and all those kinds of things. It just might need to be crafted in a different way to be culturally, sensitive and whatnot, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
but it's absolutely, like I said, I'm always surprised when I look, I'm not surprised when I see the statistics, but I'm always surprised that it's rarely mentioned. Because it's, we're such a small population to begin with, but I mean, it's,
Such a small population, but you guys are sitting at 23.8 per 100,000, right? You are at the top of the list, and that's specifically American Indian and Alaska Native, right? And then the next down is non-Hispanic white at 17.6, and then non-Hispanic Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, right underneath at 17.3. So to not be talking about it, and especially with a very small demographic, drives me to believe that there's other reasons why this is not a part of the discussion. And we
I can
take
tell
this-
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, let's be real, right? Because I just discovered it, right? Like 2 years ago, was when I first noticed. I think we were having a DODBA conference on suicide prevention. We're having biannually, right? And there was a heavy focus on Native American suicide prevention, like very specific to Native American community. But I'm like, well, where's the one for African Americans and for Latinos? You know, so I was like, well, we can't just focus on one group and leave the other one, behind.
Right.
And then it was one show, Reservation Dogs, one of my favorite shows, right? And that was the first show that I watched where the entire show was centered around teen suicide, right? And then I watched a movie, I forget the name of it, but a basketball team in a reservation again, right? The suicide, right? And then there's another show that I watched, I forgot what it was, but again, right? The Native American shows, they're all focused on, right? They're centered around, this is suicide in the summer. And you start doing your research, right? You know, lack of resources, right? A high dependency on alcohol, substance abuse is big. And the part that we don't want to discuss, the reality of it is, we're not taking care of Native Americans as a society.
Is an incident that I went through with an African American family, because the reality is I said it before, everyone suffers with mental illness. And I had a mother that came to me, basically screaming off the top of her lungs, and her son had just survived his 4th suicide attempt. And he was 14. And Dad said, oh, he don't need anything. I just need to beat him one good time. And he'll get himself together.
That's gonna fix it all.
And we don't have problems. I didn't have problems comparing himself. Black people don't have mental health problems. That's a white person's disease.
Okay. What happens in the home stays in the home.
Exactly. So, what I can't say enough is that everyone struggles. I am open to helping as many individuals as I can. We are all human, but we cannot sit here and overstep history. We cannot sit here and look at one and not look at the other. What we have to do is be able to come together as a community, and Miguel said this earlier, we need to come together as a community. And I mentioned desensitization, but let's break that cycle of dysfunction. Let's start a real conversation. It's not my people got it worse than your people. How about, let's think about the people for the future. And let's start focusing on the now, and let's have real conversations. Because mental illness, mental health, physical health, it's all related for a better tomorrow.
So that's a great segue into prevention, right? And so as we think about the communities that I just mentioned, and we don't have to stay within that space, because we're also talking about the military community, the vet community, which all of us are a part of as well. How can we start moving towards a more aggressive and more active prevention dialogue And not just the dialogue, because look, the military know how to talk. We talk all day long, but there's not a lot of times where we put true action, effective action in place, therefore helping to truly prevent what we see as an epidemic within our community. And so let's talk about that. What can we do in order to prevent? You want to start, and then Miguel, and then we'll go to you, Linda.
Sure. Well, I think just so much of what we're doing today in terms of just the awareness piece and talking about just all the different aspects of what contribute to this problem and being aware of them. I think too, resources are huge, and accessibility, like 98, are such great resources, and that you don't have to worry alone. I think for the most part, no one wants these things to happen, but a lot of times people don't know what to do when they come across it. Or they just, think, oh, maybe, it'll go away, or just maybe don't realize how serious it is. So I think we always say in our field, never worry alone. And so just being able to know, like, hey, I can reach out to you. And one of the things that I've been so touched by in my profession as a clinician that I don't get to talk about a lot is just, we all hear about the outcomes that none of us want when somebody dies, but we never get to talk about all the people that we know have been saved.
Yes.
Because somebody has gone, and I can't tell you how many times someone was like, I was hanging on by a shoestring, but my wife drove me here, or I called this number, and gosh, even this past week, I know someone who literally flew across the world to take care of her dowry, and it's like we don't get to talk about that kind of stuff as much, but that's happening
We
all
don't
the time.
get, or we don't prioritize those talks, right? We have this thing in the psychology realm, like when I taught at West Point, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So all of the things that are nice and squishy, like we don't want to talk about those things because there's tons of people who don't want to listen to them. They want to hear all of the bad things because it makes them feel better about themselves, which in itself is a problem in our society, right? So
Yeah, like the negativity bias, that's what leads, like you said, but there are so many stories of where people have just done, just the most courageous acts, and so I think that that's something that we should continue to encourage, is just listen, care, and, because you really can't save a life in this way.
thank you.
Take up space, man. I think it's important for us to understand our privileges, different variety of privileges, and access to rooms that others may not have, right? That can be intimidating, toxic, or whatever you want to call it, and have the courage in those spaces to, speak truth to power. You know what I mean? I think that's where the shift is going to happen, when you are able to understand. Let me give you an example. I was asked to do a training on prostate cancer and why you should get your prostate checked, for a group of Masons, right? Masonic Temple, this was like 2 years ago, right? And it was a bunch of retired Black NCOs and officers there, right? And by the way they were, no disrespect to me, by the way they had their crispy little jeans, I knew they were from the South, most of them, right? But, I'm sitting there talking about, go get your prostate check and all that stuff, get your colonoscopy done and all that stuff. And I'm talking all this health stuff, and I'm like, I would be irresponsible if I didn't speak in this space right now when I see, people that are older than me, you know what I'm saying, and not stress the importance of, and I was very specific in that space to say a man's emotional wellness is going to impact every person in their lives, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's your sons, whether it's your daughters, your wives, your friends, your parents. Your emotional wellness is going to impact everybody, right? And I started encouraging them, to open up about things and this and that and the other. Long story short, there was a gentleman that I opened up, because it became like a boo-hoo fest. Like everybody started crying and opening up. And one gentleman that, told a story about how when he was 17 years old, he got into an argument with his mom, and he cursed his mom out, left the house. Mom passed away. He comes home, mom is dead. And he said he's been carrying the trauma, not saying goodbye to his mama, for 60 years now. This man's like 60 something years old, and he's been carrying that pain, right? Because the world told him you cannot go to a therapist, you cannot go get help, you cannot cry. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then when he shared that story, what happened was his battle buddies, his friends, his comrades, or whatever you want to call them, I'm not a Mexican, so I don't know what they call themselves, but they just started hugging on him and like saying, "No, we got you, bro." You know what I mean? Like, so I think it's important for us to understand the privilege that we have to be in certain spaces. You know what I mean? And in those spaces, have those conversations. Yeah, man, I got a therapist. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I cry when I watch Selena. You know, whatever it is, like, it's funny, but little things like that matter because you're not gonna tell me that I'm a weak person.
It's real.
You know what I'm saying? Though, like, I think it's important for us to understand that and start having these conversations. And for the men in the room, right, people that are watching, it's important to also, when these conversations happen, for us not to try to step in and shield the women, but give women like the space to talk, like create those spaces for people to actually, for women.
Fix it or.
Well, yeah, correct. It's simple. Just giving the space to express, because I think it's a big issue in the veteran community and the active duty community also, is that either we step in to protect and shield and speak for, or we silence women. You know what I mean? So I think that's a huge problem. Also,
Not
right?
this woman, but.
Respect. Nah. But again, though, right?
Yeah.
Now you get in those spaces and you have the courage to speak.
Right.
There are a lot of people that might be intimidated by it, or you know, they're thinking about consequences or whatever experiences. Like everybody's story is not the same.
Absolutely.
So when you have when you understand where you are, the space that you're in, you see something happen, and you have the opportunity to bring up, whether it's therapy or whether it's racism or whether it's like advocating for Native American people, you have those conversations. You know what I mean? Like initiate them, get them comfortable. It's okay. You know, I think that's where the shift will happen. It's through conversation. You know what I mean? And education, obviously, but mainly the conversations and the challenges. When we see the wrong things being done, have the courage to step in and say the right thing, because courage is contagious, right? You have it, you see it, you want to do it next, and you know, you spread it and a certain level of awareness. You know what I mean?
Thank you, Miguel. Yeah, definitely the conversation, but authentic conversation,
Okay,
going back to
sure.
what you had mentioned before, because some people just want to know your business.
Yes.
And know what you got.
I want to piggyback on something that Sierra said, because awareness is key to saving lives. And while we probably had a front seat on hundreds of lives that we knew were on that cusp, to survive and just thrive, we can't share their stories. We can't share those, success stories to say, you're not alone. Everyone has their own individual struggle, because no two struggles are the same. We can't share that. So one of the things that I've always asked whenever I help families in crisis is I said, I can't do this by myself. I've given you all of the tools to recognize this. I share them on social media. I love, when Miguel does, his recordings and things like that, I'm all over. I either post them on my feed or I show them on my story. Why? Because it's important to keep that conversation. Because I hear all of the people that reach out and go, if you wouldn't have shared what Miguel, that story that Miguel did, or that recording that Miguel did, it wouldn't have helped me. I wouldn't be here today. And that's, spreading awareness. To me, that's what I like to do. I feel like, that's what I can do to contribute to say that there is hope. You're not alone. Here, listen, I'm going to share signs. I want you to know signs so that you can ask your friends. Here are the questions that you can ask to have those difficult conversations. And, question, persuade, refer. If you cannot help but you know someone is struggling, here are some resources. Don't wait after I've helped you and your loved one to survive your suicidal ideation, to sit there and share the tools and pay it forward. And that's the biggest dilemma that I see, is that yes, we have helped a lot of individuals to survive and thrive, you know, but all I ask is that when we provide you the tools and we share what we've gone through and we provide you, you know, the signs to be able to know when a friend is struggling, make sure that you keep that. Like Miguel said, it's not just for you, it's for everyone. Whether you're in uniform, you're out of uniform, you know, if you're in uniform and you have a loved one that's struggling, let's share. Let's keep this conversation going. I can guarantee you, if one person looks and understands the signs and knows the tools in order to be able to help another, that person can save a life. And then the next person can save a life. But I don't want the conversation to keep being hidden by the stigma of the silent killer called suicide. Now, I use one example, and when I ask individuals, you know, what do you think mental illness looks like? And they go, oh, I don't know. And then I say, if your loved one is shot in the head, you're gonna see that blood coming out. Mental illness is the same way. You just don't see the blood. You don't see the struggle, because the struggle is in their head. Don't shun them. Be there for them. Listen. Create a safe space. Have that authentic conversation. And whatever you do, do not make them feel bad about their struggles. You help one, know that sign, and you can help another.
That's great. And so I think we're gonna go ahead and close here in a little bit, but I do want to give you guys kind of a last say before we get everything done. And Linda, you just hit on quite a few things about knowing the signs, and one of the things that I want to talk about real quick are, what are those signs, right? What are those things that you see in people when they are having those ideations and could be potentially making that plan or have that plan, right? And so you guys throw some things out as I'm talking, but you know, maybe it's the way that their clothes look, right? If you know that they are normally well kept and now they don't look that way, they may look like they've been sleeping in their clothes or not ironing them with the nice crease down the center. Maybe it's their hair is not done, but you know that they're consistently that person.
The hair's not done, the nails are not done.
That's right.
The gentlemen, they're not getting the beard shaped up, or
Looking tired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If a gentleman is usually dressed in nice attire and all of a sudden they're just in sweats, a drastic change in an individual. Even their character. If usually they're nice and kind and open, and then all of a sudden they're short, they're distant. They disappear. They don't want to be seen. You reach out to them and they cut you off. I don't want to. I'm fine.
Going back to Miguel, right? Sleeping a lot when you know that person is energetic and always out doing things,
Yes.
right? Or it could be the other side, right? So maybe they're
They're
more of a home body.
that wants
That's
to go
right.
do
And
bungee
now
jumping
takes
all of
the
a
shoulder.
sudden.
Right? What are some of the other things we should be looking at?
I'll jump on. I know we've talked a lot about mental illness, and that's certainly not always. That does not mean that somebody is going to harm themselves, but it can be correlated like with depression. But I think it's just being aware of what's going on in their lives and different stressors. Because I know within the military, I want to say like almost half or more than half of service members who died by suicide didn't have a
diagnosis.
Didn't have a diagnosis.
That's right.
It was more just acute stressors in their life, and it could be breakups are a huge one. Relationships, especially for young people, can be really hard. It can feel like it's the end of the world. I think we all remember, like, when our hearts were broken the first time. It could be transitions like we talked about. It could be a new medical diagnosis. It could be a loss. It could, so there's all
And
kinds
even
of
a medical diagnosis for a loved one.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think just being aware of course, like you guys are all over in terms of their behavior and any change in their behavior and their appearance, and but also just what's going on around them, and asking, just getting a sense for, are they doing okay, and even if they're saying something that may sound a little macabre or just asking, like, hey, are you doing okay? Are you thinking about suicide? Because sometimes people can believe that, well, if somebody's talking about suicide, they're not actually thinking about it, and that's not the case. Like, suicidal people do talk about being suicidal, so if you hear that language, just again asking those questions and digging a little bit deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one, giving their precious items away, right? Giving things away that you would never think that they would give away, especially if you're a stingy person too, right? Like, that's a part of that. Anything else you want to add, Miguel?
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing, right, from the community support system side is noticing shifts or changes in their behavior, in their baseline behavior, right? And it's real easy to pick out when somebody goes from being happy to being sad and things like that, but we also have to be mindful of behavior that is incongruent with what you know is happening in their lives, right? So if you know that I'm going through a financial crisis, for example, if you know I have issues at work, and I take pride in taking care of my money, or I am very prideful of my job, so professional satisfaction is big for me, and I'm acting like everything is fine while I'm going through UCMJ action, for example. That behavior that I'm displaying, that sense of normalcy and baseline is not congruent with who you know me to be and what's happening in my life right now. So we have to be mindful, because you guys were talking about, not getting your hair done, getting a haircut. Well, if I'm going through a divorce or something, right? I'm not, but like if I was, and for the last few weeks I've been coming to work, like looking a little disheveled, you know what I'm saying? Like, I ain't got time for no, I don't care about my haircut, I'm trying to save my marriage, or my marriage is done, or whatever it is. So you see me in that way that's okay, you're talking to me, you know that I'm going through something, so you're being a little bit lenient on the fact that my beard is not, I don't even have a beard, I can't grow one. But if I could grow one, it's not a little trimmed up over now. And today I show up and I look completely brand new, right? Like everything is fine or whatnot. Now it could be that my marriage is saved, or I may have a Berry and I don't care about my marriage, you know what I'm saying? Whatever it is, it could be that. Or it could be that I made a decision last night. You know what I'm saying? So what you're seeing right now is not happiness, you're seeing relief. You're seeing a sense of relief. So when I woke up this morning, I had a little more energy than yesterday. So let me go ahead, you know what I mean? If I'm gonna go out, let me go out. Whatever it is, right? You're looking at behavior that's incongruent with what's happening in my life right now. So we have to be very mindful of that, because sometimes it's like, well, you can't be suicidal, we just want to lie to you. Well, if my behavior tells you that something's off with me, don't worry about what's happening in my life. You know that my behavior is giving you a sense of concern, so ask a question. Right? But it's important to remember this also, right? That moment when you gotta ask someone, are you thinking of killing yourself, is not set up in that moment. You cannot approach someone that you haven't talked to in 3 or 4 months and not care about, you see them every day, but it's good morning, and then you go back to your cubicle or whatever it is. You have to develop a connection where people, like, I call it in the green, being in the green, when nothing bad is going on, like, take the time to get to know your people. Take the time to get to know your soldiers, your co-workers, your friends, even your kids. Like, I talk to my kids one-on-one all the time about stuff at school, man, what you like, what music you listening to, like, let me see these video games, all these things, so I can get to know them enough to pick up on when things kind of shift for them. You know what I'm saying? So just be mindful of that. Be mindful that when it's time to have a difficult conversation, it needs to be set up way before that. So if you're watching this right now, like, the very next thing you do, like, when I get in my car now, I'm gonna go back home, I'll have a conversation conversation with my wife about, you know, what music she's like, whatever it is, just have that sense of connection, even with people that you're already close to. Have those conversations so that when the moment comes for the difficult conversations, it's going to be better received because it's going to come from a genuine place. It's not. It's only if a person, if you even feel like a person's suicidal, it's only one answer here, right? They need to be assessed for safety, and that needs to be done in a behavioral health clinic or ER. If they're in uniform, call the chain of command, and let someone that is trained, you know, like you probably could have done, right, make that assessment. I've been doing this work for 20 years, right? I cannot assess someone for safety. I'm not trained for that. So my only answer is gonna be, if I think you're suicidal, the only guidance is, I need you, doc, to tell me that person's safe to come home. Right? And know that when I come home, time's probably gonna be, it's gonna be okay, doc, and then, you know, you follow those guidelines, but that person should be in a safe space, and we cannot make that determination. I think if we play, what happens is we try to play this dangerous game of, I'm gonna help that person. Right?
But you're not, and you're
So
not
get them to the help they need. It's no different than if I break my arm, you can stabilize my arm, but you cannot fix my arm, right? You got a surgery. You take me to the doctor to get fixed.
Exactly.
It's the same concept. If someone's suicidal, take them to the help, and that's where it stops. You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's a great close there, as far as when you are looking at those symptoms that person could possibly have, and if they do in fact verbalize that they are considering hurting themselves, or they want to kill themselves, or no longer want to be here, you stay with that person, right? Until they get the help that they need. And then even after that, I mean, depending on what happens, more than likely it's gonna be the evaluation, which we can't be involved in. So you would probably have to walk away and come back and see that person at another time. But what's critical is you don't leave that person alone. And that's the biggest part here. Thank you, all three of you, for being here today and having this conversation. And I truly believe the information that you shared, the stories that you shared, your hearts that you shared, that it's going to help a number of people out there. But this doesn't stop the conversation, right? And even more, it doesn't stop us changing our behavior to actually be there for other people. And so I'm going to go down the list of some of the things that you just said, and then I'll leave it for you all to have any last words. You don't have to if you don't want to. But the biggest thing that I'll take away from today, and that I hope our listeners are taking away for today, community is key, right? So having a support system and community around you is key. And that could be one person, that could be having pets, right? You know, because a lot of us don't realize like how much pets really support us. Hence the reason why there's ESAs out there now, emotional support animals, right? The other thing is we must talk, right? If you're in a community, hopefully you are talking, you know. Resources, sharing those resources and not just hoarding them yourselves, whether that be you're waiting until you go through the entire process or because you're just not sharing, right? Training and understanding. So like helping people to understand that mental health is a part of our society and there should not be a stigma on it, but understanding how to recognize those changes and the differences in people, whether we're talking about actual diagnosed type conditions, bipolarism, schizophrenia, depression, clinical depression, right? You know, as we talk about all of those things, like how do we get people to understand what those look like, right? Because those are often tied to suicide. They're often tied to people harming themselves in some kind of way, even if it doesn't result into suicide, right? Talk about those who have been saved, right? Encouraging people to share their stories, because a lot of times hearing someone else's stories and seeing ourselves in that person could be the thing that saves us, right? So how do we keep that dialogue going and help those people realize that they're just as important to this conversation as the clinicians and the program managers and the nonprofits that are out there, right? Take up space. So again, it gets back into that community, right? But being able to leverage what you have as individuals to be able to bring knowledge into the realm of suicide prevention and awareness, okay? And I think that's about it. Understanding our privilege, that was the other thing, speak truth to power. And so with that, if you guys have anything else that you'd like to share, I'll leave it to you to do so. Linda, I'd love for you to share about your nonprofit. I know you work with a lot of nonprofits as well, and you're doing your thing on Miguel. So whatever your heart is telling you to share, whether it's a resource or whether it's something that you are doing individually where our followers can continue to follow you, I would love for you to share that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I love that list. The thing that I would add is just the awareness of access to lethal means, especially when you're aware that somebody isn't doing well and is suicidal, and also just with kids in the house, being in the military, we have weapons. My husband was gifted weapons after leaving units and making sure that those are locked up and secured. Same thing with, prescription medication. And so just making sure that our environment is safe, particularly if we're in the environment of someone who we know may be struggling.
Thank you.
With me, I just want to say that I believe we need a little bit more kindness and sensitivity in this world. One kind act, whether it's a hello, a smile, can save a life. And I know, I've seen it. Nobody can miss my teeth when I smile. I used to always think that they were huge until a dentist told me that they were normal. And I still don't believe them, but still, I smile all the time, even though I walk with a very, large amount of grief. I still smile. Why? Because I'm here. I miss my daughter, but I have my daughter and my other daughter and my granddaughter. There are reasons to smile, even though we've gone through and suffered traumatic events or loss. It doesn't mean that you should give up on this life. And so I still smile. I smile because that's how my heart feels, regardless if it's broken into, but it's still me. And I've had many people sit here and tell me that my smile brightened up their day. I don't even know a lot of these people, but that's just how I am. And so just a hello, a greeting, just making sure. Miguel said, I love the take up the space thing, but at the same time, be aware of your surroundings. Be kind. We need it. More kindness in this world can save lives. Thank you.
Practice self-care, right, in the form of your nutrition, your physical fitness. Is a direct correlation between, physical fitness and emotional wellness that we cannot deny. And get enough sleep, right? Your sleep hygiene is going to be important. So that's a trifecta of self-care, right? So sleep, what you eat, and having a certain level of physical fitness. Also, find community, man. That we need that. No matter if you're an introvert or extrovert, find your community, man. Find people that you can laugh with, that you can share things with, that you have something in common with, that you can start a band with, that you can play basketball, whatever it is. Find community and write down a list of what gives your life purpose today. Like, identify the things that give you purpose today. Well, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a suicide prevention leader, I'm a friend, I'm a mentor for some, right? I'm a coach. Whatever it is, like, identify that now and put it somewhere safe so that when you're feeling down, when you feel like you have no purpose, when you feel like the world is better off without you, you can go back to that list and be reminded of the things that matter to you. So.
Thank you. Well, that is a wrap for us on Humanity Over Hughes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Leave a comment, leave a like, share with your family and your friends, people who you think this could help. and keep rocking with us. Humanity Over Hughes is going to keep moving forward, having hard conversations, also some fun conversations as well. We'll have to have Miguel back on with his jokes. But we truly appreciate our followers, and we definitely appreciate these wonderful subject matter experts who decided to come on with us today. And we always have great guests, so we're looking forward to doing this again next month. And we hope you guys are well.